Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise. We are doing something different today, mainly because I am an idiot. I bought a microphone. Okay, I got a new phone, and I film everything on the phone, but I forgot to get that little piece for my microphone so that I can now attach this new phone to the microphone. Of course, could never be as simple as being able to use the same equipment that I used to have. Anyway, when I went to record this morning, I was like, oh man, dang it. I don't have what I need. And I don't want to do an episode without a mic because it just seems like that would really be bad audio. I've done that before when I didn't have a mic and the audio is pretty terrible. If you don't believe me, go back and watch Spare. So definitely wanted to not give you guys a terrible experience. But that being said, I figured that I would finally do the video that I've been promising you, which was a Ask Me Anything video. And I was supposed to do that like a month ago. So sorry about that. But here we are. I'll group the questions by like the 4 main questions I got. A lot of people want to know, how did I start this channel? What were the thoughts behind that? People wanted to know, what's my educational background? Who am I? What's the story of my life? And then there are some questions about like, where did my name come from? And lots of people were asking about our move since we moved to DC last summer. So I will cover those as briefly as I can so I don't just like bore the life out of you. How did I start the channel? Well, by God's good grace, He led me to do what I'm doing instead of what I had originally wanted to do. And I look back on what I originally wanted to do and I'm like, oh, golly, thank you, Lord. During the pandemic, when everybody was like turning to content creation, being like, yeah, why not me? I'm stuck at the house. I definitely, my sister and I were talking about doing something together. Both of us were looking at YouTube being like, she's a stay-at-home mom, I work part-time, and we're like, if we could get something off the ground, that might be really helpful for our families. So we talked about it, but she lives in Alabama. I lived in Texas at the time. It was sort of like, how's it really going to happen? And also, we couldn't quite nail down what we wanted to do. Both of us are, like, we love discussion, we love literature, we love politics, we love philosophy, psychology, like all of these things. But we were really leaning towards more like of a political thing. But like at the same time, there were so many voices coming out. I say like 2020. Of course, there have been like for years. But 2020, everybody was at home giving their opinion on the state of the world. And it just felt like being one more talking head was probably not going to be that great. And I also tend to think, and you guys, I am prepared to be lambasted in the comments for this. For whatever reason, I feel like male political commentators are taken more seriously. I feel like female political commentators are sometimes looked at as kind of like difficult, even if they're saying the same thing that the men are. And that wasn't the reason I didn't want to do it, but I also just thought like, if I'm going to go out and give my voice to something and talk about something, I don't want to just be saying the same thing everybody else is saying. And I don't really think I have anything new to offer this conversation. And so I decided, I was like, I don't really want to talk politics. At the same time, my whole life, I've always been really interested in politics ever since I was like a little kid. But I don't necessarily think I can say it better than some of the other people out there. And I didn't really feel like there was any reason for me to weigh in on that. There's plenty of people out there doing a great job. I didn't have anything to add to that conversation. I didn't have anything to, like, I wouldn't tune in to hear me listen to talk about politics, So I was trying to think like, what would I want to listen to? Because also at the same time of 2020, like I felt like the conversation towards politics was getting very polarizing, very antagonistic, and very ugly. And I was like, I don't really want to play a part in that. And I also was getting really, like, even though my whole life I liked politics, I was getting really sick of politics in a way I never had been my whole life. Even now, like I've fully, I wouldn't say like I don't pay attention to politics because I do, but like I don't find any joy in it. Like it used to be entertainment to me to like see what was going on in politics, and now I'm like, please, I cannot. And so I just knew that for the long haul, I couldn't do that and enjoy it. So even if like, say like I, against all odds, found success in it, I knew I would hate my life if I was spending my life talking about politics because it's just become such an ugly topic. Like we can't even have conversations anymore about it. So I was like, off that. So then I was like, okay, what do I want to talk about? well, I love talking about books. And at that same time, Spare had come out. And I had this idea. I was like, maybe I'll review memoirs because I love memoirs and I love biography and I love history. And I was like, how can I make this something that I would listen to? Like, what do I want to listen to? Because I was like looking for something to listen to, like when I clean the house or, when I run errands, when I work out, all this. And I was like, what would I want to listen to? And I thought, well, I would like to listen to somebody. At the same time, Sparehead was coming out. We were getting all these like sound bites of the book. And I remember thinking that book's got to be more than just like the time he got pushed down with the dog bowl. Like, that's such a weird and wild thing. But this book is like pages and pages, like hundreds of pages long. Why are we only talking about the one thing that happened? I was like, I bet I could like read that and tell that story pretty entertainingly. And I also wanted to find out more than just the dog bowl incident. So I ordered the book and I decided I would read it and talk about it like I would if I was reading it with a friend. And I did. And the book got a really good response and the channel grew really, really fast. And then after that book was done, I was like, all right, well, that was one side of the story, but I'm obviously very biased. And so I was casting around looking for like an antidote to what I just read. And a bunch of people were like, oh, you should read Revenge. And so I did that one. And then it just kind of spiraled. And as long as I was talking about royal news, this channel has always done really well. People really like that topic. I think I had visions of being able to talk about other books. I think I had visions of being able to cover other biographies, other memoirs. I've done other memoirs, as you all have known. I started with one book that just did not get a very good response about Hunter Thompson's son. A lot of people just weren't interested in that story. So I didn't do it because it was kind of a waste of time. And it's the only book I haven't finished, to my discredit. But when you have like 1,000 things you're doing, you just have to prioritize. And I was like, what is the point of doing this book? I also wasn't loving it. So I didn't finish that one. And then there were some other memoirs I've done. Like obviously I did Jada Pinkett Smith's book. I did Britney Spears' book. Are those the only other two? I think those are the only other two books that I didn't do that were royal or about the royal family. And those have not really done super well either. Oh, and then I guess I did Tyler Zed's Trailer Park Parable. But for the most part, I think that I didn't intend for this channel to become like royal news. That wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. Not that there's anything wrong with talking about them. There's a lot of channels out there like that. So it wouldn't have ever entered my mind to make a channel that was about the royal family. I enjoy talking about it. I think it's very interesting. Clearly, there's lots of us that enjoy the topic, but I had never intended for that to be what this channel is about. But then at the same time, it's like you kind of have to steer your channel towards what people are enjoying. So if I want to make something that people enjoy watching, then it can't always just be like, I want to do this, I want to do that. So sometimes I'll throw in books that I wanted to do. Like I wanted to do Trailer Park Parable. This channel has kind of morphed into something that I hadn't intended for it to, but I'm not unhappy about where it's gone. I will continue. If I see a book that I want to do, I'm going to do it. But for the most part, it does look like it's kind of settled on like royal topics, and that's fine. And I'm really enjoying the Diana book that we're doing, so that's good. So that's kind of a little bit about how I got to doing the channel. Okay, who am I? That was the other question. People are like, where do you come from? What is the deal? I have such... if I was really to tell you my whole life story, this video would be like 4 hours long. So I'm not going to go there. But I will tell you that I grew up, the first almost 10 years of my life, I grew up overseas in Papua New Guinea. My parents worked at a missionary school, and they worked it was a boarding school for missionary kids, because like if you are out in a tribe and you're trying to translate the Bible into a language that has never been written down before, you really don't have time to educate your kids. And there was becoming an issue where missionary kids were coming back to the States for college and were just woefully unprepared because their parents just didn't have the time or the resources to homeschool them, because at that time, there just wasn't as many homeschool curriculums available and things like that. So my grandparents in like the 50s and 60s had helped to establish this school so that people, and not just missionary students, any local could go to this school, but it had been started predominantly so that when missionary kids had to go back to the States for further education, they would go back prepared. So my grandparents had been really instrumental in starting that. My parents got married. They went back out. They taught at the school. And so that was where the first 10 years of my life were spent. And then we ended up coming back to the States. My dad wanted to go to seminary, and so he went to seminary, and that was in Birmingham, Alabama. He went to Samford at Beeson Divinity School in Birmingham, and so that's where I spent those years of my life. I am the oldest of 5. I have a twin sister. I have 2 other sisters and a brother. So there's a whole bunch of us. We're all just like this. It was the most fantastic experience growing up in such a big family, and I cannot advocate enough for big families. If you have parents that are able to handle it. My mom was amazing. Like, I don't think I ever saw my mom get upset. And if she was upset, it was like over something she should have been upset about. Like, not just like losing it or screaming or anything like that. Like, my mother was just calm as could be. And if she was ever upset, it was like for a legitimate reason. And she was such a spiritual force for me. She was my introduction to the love of God. And I think that she shaped me and molded me to love Christ in a way that no other human being has ever done or ever will. She did her job to perfection. And I think that, if you've watched this channel for a long time, you know that when I was 21, my mom died of breast cancer. And my youngest sister was 16 at the time. And it was a huge blow. I mean, it was the greatest loss of my life. As it's the greatest loss of anybody's life when they lose a parent, or most of the time. Even if you had a marginal relationship with your parents, it's very earth-shattering to lose a parent. But for me and for my siblings, to lose somebody who had been so instrumental in the development of our minds and our souls, because when we came back to the States, she had homeschooled us for years. So, I mean, it's just like everything I knew in life, I had been taught by her. Predominantly. I mean, obviously my dad too, but she was the primary parent in my life. And the loss was so profound. But I will tell you, when because a lot of you asked about like my spiritual life and it's obvious if you watch these videos, it's obvious that I do have faith. And so a lot of people ask about that. And I will tell you that I think that my whole life I was kind of a nominal Christian. Even though I grew up with parents who had first been missionaries and my dad was a pastor, I knew who Christ was. I could answer all the Sunday school questions. I was not biblically illiterate. I knew the things that you're supposed to know, I guess, as a Christian. But like my heart wasn't changed. I had this really broken idea that because I knew who God was, I would then act as God would have me to act. But I had really divorced my life from the influence of the Holy Spirit in that I don't walk through life doing the right thing under my own strength and power. I walk through life doing the right thing because I am empowered by the Holy Spirit. But for some reason, that little part of salvation had there was a veil over my eyes about that for years. And so I found being a Christian to be almost like, I just felt like a continual failure because unlike my mother, who was like calm under any storm, I never was. I was impatient. I had a quick temper. I had an acid tongue in my head. Like I felt like there was always these things that I couldn't control. And I just found it just to be annoying that I was like, if I am a Christian, why can't I do the right things? I never doubted Christ. I never doubted like God's love for me. I just found it a frustrating standard that I couldn't seem to manage in my life. And so I feel like I spent a lot of time in my life knowing God, but not wanting to get close to him, feeling like I was a continual disappointment to him. Like being sure that he was sorry he had sent his son to save me. And so I think that there was always this shame that kind of got in the way of my relationship with God for years, for like my whole life until like in my 20s. Even though I would have called myself a Christian. Anyway, all this to say that when my mom passed away, truly, I never felt like I needed to develop a real relationship with God because in a lot of ways, my mom was my God. She loved me well. She was incredibly warm and inviting and patient. Like all the characteristics of God I found in my mom. And if I had spiritual questions, if I needed prayer, like she was kind of like my priest in a way. Like she would pray with me and for me. She would answer all my questions. I didn't feel the absence of God in my life. Like, people use it like I had a God-shaped hole in my life. Like I didn't feel like that because my mom was my God in so many respects. Now that I'm an adult looking back on why there was always a distance between me and God. So it's the shame element, but then also just feeling like if I needed love and comfort and assurance, like I would just go to my mom. When she passed away, it plunged me into a need to find love. Because for a lot of complicated reasons and stuff, I was not always able to find that with my dad. And that's not for this video, but he's a great man. But, sometimes you just have different relationships with different parents. And I got married young. I got married when I was 22. Is that true? See, I was 21 when I got engaged, 22 when I got married. Anyway, somewhere around there, 21, 22. And we moved to Germany shortly after we were married. I had one baby when we moved to Germany. I was pregnant with our second when we moved to Germany. And every baby I had, it was like I felt the loss of my mom all over again. And when we moved to Germany, my husband was working in the infantry, and we were in Hohenfels, Germany, and he was working to train with a lot of of our allied forces. And he was helping train those armies. And so there was constantly an aloneness because he had to leave early in the morning. He came home late at night. He worked many weekends straight through the whole week. And I was alone by myself in a foreign country with two little kids. And we lived in this little Bavarian village. But it was the sweetest time of my life because it was just me and God. Me, God, and the loss of my mom that I was still working through. Because I buried it because she died right before I got married. And so I just focused all my attention on I'm getting married. And I was still in college, and I was I buried that hurt deep. But when my babies came along, I could not bury it anymore. Every birth I had was just it felt like my mom had died all over again. And so it was God took me away from all the distraction of life so that it was just him, me, and the babies. And I would go, I put the kids in the stroller, and we'd walk all these logging trails, and we'd go find where the sheep were at pasture. And I mean, I would just walk those woods with my babies and talk to Jesus. And I learned to love him. And I felt his love for me in a way I had never, ever conceived of my whole life. And all the lies I believed that he didn't love me, or not that he didn't love me, but that he regretted sending his son for me. All the shame that I had, all of the false beliefs I had that I had to sort of conjure up, goodness. That because I knew God, I was supposed to be good. All of that falseness that I had clung to from someplace, and I don't know where it came from because my parents did not teach me that. Ever. But it was a veil and a falseness that clouded my heart and my mind and my soul. And the Lord just took me out for a season, 3 years in Germany. And he took me out for a season just to teach me how much he loved me. And it was lonely. Those were lonely days, but I know intellectually that I had a hard time. I had a hard time being a mom by myself out there, and I had friends and stuff, but a lot of the friends lived on base and stuff like that. And I didn't, and it was it was a jarring experience, to be doing that. I was young and with the two kids and my husband always away. And I know, I found a journal the other day from that time, and I was and I was really having a hard time. But in my recollection of that, I don't remember anything but God. I don't remember anything but the Lord. And I would go back to that time in a heartbeat. Because even if it was difficult in a lot of respects, Christ washed me in his love the whole time I was gone. And I knew him in ways that I came back, and the distraction of life just came back all over me. And America's a very distracting place. even going to the grocery store, like I remember in Germany going and I'm like you had like a couple of options of what you wanted. Like they're not like stocking the shelves with like 1,000 varieties of everything. And I remember even just going back to a grocery store in America, I was like, whoa. Like I had forgotten how much choice I had, but then also how distracting that is to always have kind of like it's fatiguing to have to make so many decisions all the time and to have so many choices. Anyway, kind of got off track there, but like that's kind of my spiritual story. As far as my education, so obviously went to the missionary school when I was a little kid. Then we came back to the States. My mom homeschooled me. Then all the way up to pretty much about to 10th grade. In 10th grade, I went to the public school. So we were living in Alabama at the time. I was living in Hoover. And I don't know if any of you guys remember this, probably you don't, because it was like on MTV for like a season. But there was this show on MTV called Two-A-Days, and it was like followed like a team, football team, through their season. And they came and they filmed their first season at Hoover High School, where I was going that year. So you can imagine, I mean, I was such a nerdy, weird little kid, and going to a huge public school after having been homeschooled. And we were super poor. All my clothes were like thrift store stuff. Like I was such an outlier, such an oddball. And I remember I didn't really have any friends my sophomore year, didn't really have any friends my junior year. Senior year, I'd started working at Banana Republic and I had a nice wardrobe. And I think, when I lost some weight that year and people started to want to be my friend by senior year, but by that point I was just kind of like, I don't know. I mean, I didn't feel invested at all. I mean, I would just go do my work and leave. People invited me to parties and stuff, and I just I never wanted to go because I felt like people just wanted to be my friends now that I was cuter than I had been, like now I didn't look like such a hobo all the time and, I'd lost some weight. And so I guess I just remember feeling like I'm not really here to make a lot of friends. But I look back on it now and I'm really glad that I sort of held myself off, not because those people weren't good people. I'm sure that they all turned out to be great. I hope so. But they were all involved in a lot of things I didn't want to get involved in, like a lot of drinking and sleeping around and stuff like that. And like, I remember sitting in math class, and I sat with one of like some of the more popular kids in math class, and they would all be talking about what they'd done on spring break. And like, I was so naive, like I didn't even follow half the conversation. But I remember being like, you guys are like having sex with each other? Like, it just blew my mind. And I remember so many times at lunch, people talking about things and like totally not knowing what they're talking about. And then later on realizing like, they're talking about like oral sex and all this. And I'm like, what? I just was so completely out of it. Innocent as the day is long. But I think it sort of protected me in a lot of ways. And then I had been planning on going to Gordon College for college. So I've been planning on going to Gordon College in Massachusetts. I had a little bit of a scholarship, but that's when my mom was diagnosed with cancer my senior year, like right before I graduated. And so I decided to stay closer to home, and I went to community college, and then I went to the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Again, still trying to stay closer to home. And I cannot stress to you how good it was that I did stay closer to home. At the time, it was really hard and sad. I mourned the loss of not having gone to Gordon for a long time. My parents never asked me not to go, but I also knew I couldn't actually afford it, and I didn't want to go into tons of debt for it. And even though I had a little bit of a scholarship, it was just not barely enough to cover what it would actually cost for me to move up to Boston and go to school there. And so I think there was a lot of fear that drove that decision. I think I could have made it work, but I didn't know how. And, this is no condescension on my parents, but like they weren't really very familiar with how the college system worked. And I didn't really feel like I got a lot of help from them in like knowing how to discern like what, like even just taking the SAT and the ACT, like they just didn't like I knew a lot of kids' parents who were super involved and very like type A about the college application process. And my parents were not like that. So I felt like I just didn't know where to turn, and I was not very proactive about the whole college experience, which at the time I felt really bad about. And now looking back, I'm like, well, probably saved me a lot of money. It did save me a lot of money when I went to UAB because I worked my way through college and I never had any college debt. But I couldn't have said the same if I'd gone to Gordon College. And also, I met my husband at University of Alabama at Birmingham. He and I had a class together, and he just got back from Iraq, and I just thought he was like the cutest thing in the whole world. And I respected him so much for what he had done for our country. He'd been over there for a very long time. He had 2 back-to-back deployments. He thought he was going to get to come home after 9 months and ended up being there for 15 months. And it was during the surge, and he came back. And I just remember thinking, somebody who would do that for my freedom is somebody that I want to know. And we fell in love really, really quickly. We met in August, and we were engaged by December, and we were married the next August, and we've been together for like 15 years. So it's it's been good. And speaking of him, so he was in the military for a long time. He was in the infantry for a long time. After he graduated from college, he went back in as an active duty officer. And so that led us to Germany, and then we came back here. We lived all over the United States, various places. But then he ended up getting out. We went and moved to Texas. We were looking to put down some roots for our kids and everything like that. And then he got a job with the Secret Service. So, of course, having a job with the Secret Service, you're going to have to come to DC eventually. So it wasn't a surprise to us that we had to move here. It was just not necessarily a move I wanted to make. And I've struggled with that move. I've really, really struggled with us living here. I've struggled with the culture here. It's just Dallas is a culture where people brag about their money. It's a very showy culture, especially if you're in certain pockets of Dallas. DC, you don't brag about your money, you brag about your connections mercilessly. Everybody has done something that would shock you it's fairly impressive. And after a while, you just get really sick of breathing the rare air. And it just feels like there's just so many things that happened in our move that were not expected. Down to the school that our kids went to was just, it had a rough year. It's just really not the school that we thought we were coming to. And I think I had not planned on teaching 4th grade, but was really pulled into it because my son wouldn't have a teacher if I didn't take the job. And I really love my little 4th graders. They're great. And it's been a really great experience. As far as I never taught 4th grade before. So that was new for me, and it's been a great experience because the kids are great. But just the school on a whole, I don't think is necessarily where we're going to land. So I just think that it's just been a lot of loss for me. I've grieved this move. I know it sounds so materialistic, but I really miss our old house. We live in a super small rental, and that's just for a season, and that's what I have to keep telling myself. It's all for a season. We rented because we knew that we had intentions for our kids to go to schools a little further north in Virginia and in Maryland. And so now that all those applications are back, and we know that our kids have some different educational experiences coming their way, now we can look at buying a house closer that way. But we've moved a lot, and I've never had a hard time with the move ever. It's just been what do I get to learn here? But for whatever reason, this move has just been a rough one for me. My husband's schedule is wild and wacky. He doesn't know what it's going to be from week to week. Yeah, that's not true. He finds out on Wednesday what the following week will be. So every week is different. It's shift work. And so it feels very much like navigating this realm as a single parent. Sometimes it feels that way. And really, I don't know if I can say that. It just, there's no consistency in it. And so that's kind of hard. And then too, I'd always worked part-time as a mom, and now working full-time as a mom. You guys, that is not what's up. If I'm honest with you, both parents working full-time, I've realized it goes against my entire ethic as a mom. It just does. And if you work full-time and it works for you, I am so happy for you, because it doesn't work for us. It just doesn't. I cook every meal, and I want to be there for my kids in big ways, and I want them to feel like I'm really dependable. And lately, I just feel I feel like my entire life is on a hope and a prayer, just flying by the seat of my pants all the time. And I don't like that feeling. And I don't want that feeling for my family either. So anyway, we're definitely adjusting our expectations for next year. I will not be teaching full time next year, that's for sure. So I think that like next year will be better and different and more normal for our family, and I'm really looking forward to that. Let's see. Oh, the last thing that I have to say, I did get some questions about, want to know about my name and where it came from. My name is Cheer, and Cheer Denise is my first and middle name. But where that came from was, so my parents had been missionaries in Papua New Guinea in the 1950s. They weren't originally starting the school. They were actually out in a tribe, and they were learning the language with the intention of writing down the Bible in this language. And, they had partners and other people that were working with them on that. But it was the 1950s, and my grandmother was pregnant, and they were like way out in the middle of nowhere. And she'd been sick the whole pregnancy. She didn't really know why, but she had a lot of allergies and a lot of various illnesses. So it sort of all just fell into it. And anyway, one day, I don't remember if it's because something happened, but she went into labor early. There was nobody there to help her except for my grandfather. So he delivered the baby. And when the babies, because as it turns out, she was pregnant with triplets. And the first baby that was born was stillborn, and it hadn't even formed correctly. So it didn't, it was a very malformed baby. And the second baby that was born, they named Joy. And the third baby that was born was named Cheer. And Cheer had come from, my grandfather had been reading the scriptures, and he had read the part where Christ says, "In this world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world." And so he thought Cheer was a beautiful name for a baby girl. Knowing that his wife was expecting, they had set that name aside. But when the babies were born, they were so small that they needed to hike out to a hospital in order to ensure that these babies would live. But it was a super arduous journey. They had a nurse who was with them, who walked with them, and they had to stop every 20 minutes to build a fire to heat these water bottles to keep the babies warm. And unfortunately, the little baby named Joy died on the way. They buried her on the way to the hospital. And when they got to the hospital, they laid little baby Cheer down on the bed, and she died just as they laid her down on the bed. It was a huge loss. But when my mom got pregnant with me and my twin sister, my grandfather asked, "Would you consider using the name Cheer?" I always thought it was a really beautiful name for a little girl, and I was always really sad we didn't get a chance to use it. And so they named me Cheer, and that's where my name came from, which I think is a really beautiful story, and I really love that verse. And I think when I was growing up, it was a point of contention for me because it was an easy thing to be told, "Well, you're not acting up to your name," sort of thing. But I love the name. It's so unusual, and you don't meet many Cheers. At least I haven't. And so it's a beautiful name. I really do like it, but I especially like the story behind it, and I love the perseverance of my grandparents. They experienced so much in their time they experienced so much in their time as missionaries, and their love and their perseverance and the consistency that they showed as believers was a huge example and left a real legacy for our family. Anyway, time's up. I have to go. I think I've answered all the main questions. So I hope you enjoyed this strange little foray. I'm sorry for those of you who are looking forward to an actual episode of our book, but don't worry, we will have that episode tomorrow. So thank you so much for your patience with me, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.